Hey everyone, and welcome back. You ready to dive deep again with us? Today we're taking on a real classic one, Terry Gilliam's Brazil. And you guys sent some really amazing stuff, articles, thoughts, even a few of your own personal stories. And we're gonna try to sift through all that today and figure out, just what makes this film tick, why it still resonates almost 40 years later. So we're gonna be looking at everything. The crazy production history, the symbolism, even those crazy visuals. I mean, Brazil is really a trip. But under all of that, you've got some serious themes going on: bureaucracy, escapism, and a whole lot of dystopia.
One of the things that really strikes me about Brazil is that it's not just presenting us with some, far-off dystopia. It's holding up a mirror to our own world.
Yeah.
And using satire to make us think about it. I mean, those articles you sent about dealing with healthcare and government agencies, those could practically be scenes right out of the film. Oh, absolutely. And that's, something we'll be digging into today. So for those of you who haven't seen Brazil, let's set the stage. Our main character is Sam Lowry. He's this kind of average guy stuck in a world buried under mountains of paperwork. And like you said, it's all these systems that are supposed to help us, right? But instead they just make life more complicated.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's like that article you shared about the DMV, but 1,000 times worse. Gilliam takes those little everyday frustrations we've all experienced and he blows them up. Shows us how systems meant to help us can actually turn into these tools of control and dehumanization.
Yeah, it's kind of bleak. But then Sam has these incredible dream sequences, right?
Yeah.
Where he's flying above it all, escaping from the grime and the chaos.
And those dreams, they're not just there for the visual spectacle. They represent Sam's desire for freedom. That yearning we all have to break free from the pressures of society. Which reminds me, you mentioned being really interested in the psychology of escapism. Brazil really digs into that, doesn't it? The desires, the anxieties that fuel our need to escape.
It really does. And thinking about that, you sent over that article on virtual reality. It just made me think, is technology in Brazil truly offering escape? Or is it just another form of control, a different cage?
That's a really interesting connection.
Yeah.
And the film plays with that ambiguity. It makes us question the role of technology. Is it a tool for liberation? Or a way to manipulate and surveil us? Think about those security screens everywhere in the film. Kind of makes you think about the facial recognition tech in that other article you sent.
Yeah.
Doesn't it?
It's kind of freaky how much Gilliam predicted about the future, but it's not just a lecture about technology.
Right.
We got mistaken identities, a little romance, even some action thrown in there too.
Oh yeah, Brazil's a wild ride. But underneath all that, it's a sharp critique of totalitarian systems. Like that scene where Sam tries to order lunch.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be a simple thing.
Right.
Right. But it turns into this absurd bureaucratic nightmare. Gilliam uses humor to make us laugh at how ridiculous it all is. But at the same time, he's highlighting how dehumanizing those systems can be.
That scene always gets me. It's like every time I've been put on hold by customer service for an hour, those pneumatic tubes, they're haunting me.
And that's the brilliance of Brazil. It's funny, but it also makes you think. It blends satire with this vision of a future that sometimes feels a little too close for comfort.
Okay, before we get completely lost in the bureaucratic maze, let's talk about the look of the film. I mean, visually, it's stunning. This crazy blend of retrofuturism and Art Deco. I've never seen anything quite like it.
It's breathtaking, isn't it? Imagine Fritz Lang's Metropolis, but with a 1950s twist. You've got these towering structures, claustrophobic hallways, and technology that's both clunky and advanced all at the same time. And, Gilliam did most of that with practical effects and incredible set design.
Yeah, you were telling me you were a huge fan of the production designer Norman Garwood. His work is incredible. And in Brazil, those sets, they just dwarf the characters, right? Which visually plays into that feeling of being trapped.
Exactly. The visuals aren't just there to look pretty. They're a key part of the storytelling. Each set piece is another layer of red tape suffocating the characters, reflecting the film's themes of control and oppression.
Okay, so we've talked about the look, the satire, but there's still that big question, why Brazil? There's got to be more to it than just the title, right?
Oh, there definitely is. Remember that song, Aquarela do Brasil, that keeps popping up?
Yeah.
That song becomes this haunting motif, a symbol of escapism and longing for something better.
But the Brazil we see in the film is not exactly the paradise the song describes. So is Brazil a real place or just the seductive illusion, kind of like how Sam escapes into his dreams?
Exactly. It raises all these questions about the nature of escape, the allure of fantasy, and the blurry line between what we desire and what's real. And that ambiguity, that tension between dreams and reality is at the very heart of Brazil.
And it all leads up to that ending, which we'll get to later. But first, I think we need to talk about how this film even got made. I mean, the production of Brazil was almost as chaotic as the film itself.
And that chaos really ties into one of the film's central themes, the struggle for control. You see, Gilliam famously clashed with the studio over his vision for the film, especially the ending. But we'll save that story for later.
That fight for control behind the scenes, it really makes you think about how much freedom you need to create art, right?
It's a really interesting question.
Right.
And it ties in directly with what Brazil is all about. You see, Gilliam wanted to make this dark satire, a really bleak commentary on bureaucracy and what happens when you try to squash individual expression. But the studio, they wanted something a little more marketable, you know?
Right. They wanted a happy ending. Like, love conquers all. It's like they completely missed the point. It'd be like adding a happy ending to 1984.
Exactly. A happy ending would just destroy the whole point of the film. You know, that biting critique of conformity and how there are no happy endings in a dystopia. But luckily, Gilliam fought for his vision.
He was like Sam in the film, fighting against the system, but in the real world.
Absolutely. The studio even went as far as to make their own cut of the film, a much happier, lighter version that Gilliam hated. It was a battle for the soul of Brazil. And thankfully, Gilliam's vision won out.
You mentioned having a clip of Gilliam talking about this whole thing.
Oh yeah, I do. Here's Gilliam in his own words. They told me, you can't end a movie like this. You'll kill your career. And I said, well, I'd rather kill my career than make a film I don't believe in. Pretty powerful stuff.
It really is. It shows you the power of believing in your art and knowing that if you compromise your vision, you're betraying the whole point of it.
And that's a lesson we can all take away, right? Standing up for what we believe in, even when it's hard.
Yeah.
Especially when it means challenging the status quo or people in power.
It's cool to see how that played out both in the making of the film and in the story itself.
Speaking of the story, let's go back to that ending we keep talking about.
Yeah.
What did you think about that final scene? Was it a happy ending or a tragedy?
Honestly, it's a question that's always stuck with me. Part of me thinks Sam finally escaped from the Ministry of Information. You know, that symbol of bureaucracy gone mad. But then there's this other part of me that thinks maybe his freedom isn't real.
That ambiguity is what makes that ending so brilliant and so unsettling. It makes us question what freedom really means, what price we're willing to pay for it, and whether escape is even possible. It's like that quote from your notes, there is no escape from yourself.
And then there's that image of the burning tower block right at the beginning and the end of the film. Is it destruction? Or is it like a cleansing of a corrupt system? It's such a powerful image with so many different interpretations, just like the ending.
Exactly. And those interpretations, they depend on our own experiences, our fears, our understanding of the world. It just shows how skilled Gilliam is as a filmmaker, that he made a film that still sparks debate and gets such strong reactions from people after all these years.
I'll admit, the first time I saw Brazil, it completely overwhelmed me. It's so dense and layered, full of metaphors and ideas. It took me a few watches to really appreciate it.
Me too. It's not a film you can just passively watch. It demands your attention, your engagement. It makes you wrestle with these uncomfortable truths about society and human nature. And that's what makes it such a rewarding experience.
Before we wrap up our deep dive into Brazil, I wanted to touch on its legacy. Why do you think this film from 1985 still resonates with audiences today?
I think it's because the themes it explores, bureaucracy, individual freedom, the dangers of technology, they're even more relevant now than they were back then. We live in a world where data is constantly being collected. Our every move is tracked. Our choices are influenced by algorithms. It's like Gilliam's dystopia isn't so far-fetched anymore.
Yeah, it's like the film is reflecting our own anxieties right back at us. Like all those articles you shared about AI privacy and the power of big tech Brazil taps into his fears about what the future holds for humanity in this increasingly technological world.
It is a bit sobering. But Brazil also offers hope. It reminds us that even when things seem impossible, the human spirit, the desire for freedom and individuality can still thrive. Remember those dream sequences? Those moments of pure escape. They remind us that imagination is powerful, that we should never give up on our dreams, and that even in the darkest of times, there's still beauty and connection to be found.
You've got me thinking now, all those articles about the metaverse, virtual reality, are those just today's versions of Sam's dream sequences? Is technology offering us that same escape, that liberation, or is it just a different kind of control?
That is a great question, and it's something worth thinking about as we move further into this digital age.
Okay, I think we've covered a lot of ground here. But before we say goodbye to Brazil, let's talk about some of the little details that might have been missed on a first watch. You know, like those Easter eggs you find in video games. The little things that add another layer to the whole experience.
Absolutely. Sometimes the smallest details can be the most revealing. Like, did you know Jonathan Pryce, who plays Sam, he wore colored contacts for the entire film?
No, I didn't. I always thought his eyes looked kind of strange.
They do. And those contacts were chosen to give his eyes this washed out, almost lifeless look.
Yeah.
It's subtle, but it says so much about how detached Sam is from the world around him, his longing for something more. It's like he's always looking inward, lost in his thoughts and dreams.
Wow, I never would have caught that. It's amazing how much a simple pair of contacts can convey. What else did you find? It's amazing, right? How much thought went into every little detail. It just shows how much depth there is to Brazil.
It's true. Every time you watch it, you notice something new. Like, did you know that Brazil's visual style is actually inspired by early cinema? Specifically, the work of Georges Méliès.
Now that you mention it, I can kind of see it. Méliès was all about illusion and spectacle, right? His films were full of these fantastical images, and he used all these innovative special effects to create them. Brazil has that same kind of visual flair, but, with a darker twist.
Exactly. Gilliam's a big fan of Méliès. He even talked about how Méliès inspired him to use these really elaborate sets and practical effects to create these worlds that just defy logic and reality. Like those scenes where Sam's flying through the air, surrounded by clouds and all those pipes, like something straight out of a Méliès film, but with that dystopian edge.
That mix of fantasy and the everyday. That's what makes Brazil so visually striking. And speaking of influences, you mentioned that the character of Sam Lowry has some interesting literary connections.
Oh, yeah. The character of Sam Lowry was actually inspired by a character from a novel by J.G. Ballard. He's known for writing about dystopian futures and the psychological effects of technology. It's not a direct adaptation or anything, but you can definitely see the similarities between Ballard's worlds and the society in Brazil.
So it's like Gilliam took Ballard's ideas and gave them his own unique spin, added that dark humor and those incredible visuals.
Exactly. And it's that blend of literary inspiration and Gilliam's own cinematic style. That's what makes Brazil so unique and so timeless. It's both an homage to dystopian literature and a powerful statement in its own right.
Okay, before we wrap things up, any other fun facts about Brazil that you think our listeners would enjoy?
Well, this one's kind of ironic considering what the film's about, but Terry Gilliam actually got the idea for the bureaucratic nightmare in the film from his own experiences dealing with red tape.
It's like they say, write what you know, or in Gilliam's case, film what frustrates you. It's almost too perfect that all those forms and procedures and the absurdity of it all came from Gilliam's real life.
I know, right? It makes those scenes even funnier and more relatable. I mean, we've all felt that frustration of being trapped in a system that just seems designed to dehumanize us.
Yeah.
Gilliam just took that feeling and cranked it up to 11.
It's that connection to reality that gives Brazil its lasting power. It's a film that speaks to our fears about the world. But it also offers hope. It reminds us that even when we're up against it, the human spirit can still endure.
And that's what makes it such an important film to watch, especially now. It makes us think critically about the systems we live in, to question authority, and to never give up on a better future.
Well, I think we've made it through the maze of Brazil. We've found some hidden gems. And I think we've shown why this film is still so relevant today. What were your biggest takeaways? What will you be thinking about long after this deep dive?
For me, it's that powerful combination of satire and sincerity. The film makes us laugh at the absurdity of it all, but it also makes us feel the very real threat that bureaucracy poses to our freedom.
I totally agree. Brazil is a film that stays with you. It makes you think, it makes you question, and it reminds you to hold on to that little bit of rebellion that we all have inside us.
It's a reminder that even in a world that feels like it's going crazy, there's still beauty and hope. And there's always a reason to fight for a better future. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time for another journey into the world of film.